Hi, folks. I suggest we wait another 5 minutes, maybe, as I think there's going to be more people joining. But welcome to the TAPS interim 2022. Hey, folks. Welcome. I think we should maybe wait until 5 past the hour until we get started to give folks a couple more minutes to join, but feel free to switch on your video audio. As you know, we're not as formal in our interim meetings.
Hi.
Hey. And I think they actually changed lead actor, so we now get a grid view of more than 9 people. I think that was an issue in the previous interim.
So before we really start, I would be curious to ask whether someone in this room is planning to go to Vienna if it's possible.
Yeah, planning.
Yeah, I think if TAPS is having a meeting, I would like to try to be there in person. Oh, did we get a queue? Oh, I think maybe not.
So
Oh,
I'm
Martin wrote
but
that
I'm
he's
not
going to be there.
sure. So I'm trying, but I'm not sure whether I will make it due to corporate travel policies.
Okay, folks, it's 5 past the hour. Welcome to our first TAPS interim of 2022. Today, Aaron couldn't make it, unfortunately, because he had a conflicting meeting. But yeah, welcome. As you may have seen on the agenda, today we were planning to discuss more issues and PRs as usual, and then also talk about an agenda for a potential TAPS session at IETF-113. We're going to have to decide whether to have such a session today or by the end of this week. So yeah, please keep that in mind. But why not get started with the issues and PRs first? If that's okay with folks, would anybody be willing to drive our slides? Not slides, GitHub. Please.
I can try to do that.
Thank you, Tommy.
I think in Meet Echo, is it sharing the entire screen that we get to do?
Yeah, I think there's the usual window versus screen.
Yeah, I don't see window. I just see
Okay.
screen. So you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see your. I can see your screen at least.
Okay. I'll just not switch to any other tabs. All right. So we have 8 open PRs. Oh, and unfortunately, they don't have tags for API versus implementation, etc. Should we just go oldest to newest?
Yeah, let's try to do that.
Yeah, I feel like this one is still do not merge yet. So we're going to wait for Kyle on that. There's one I had opened, Brian approved, and Michael, you had a comment. Shall we discuss this one? Essentially, this was, I believe, what we had agreed at a previous meeting to say, we're not going to mention framers before we've even defined them as part of message context in this vague scope thing. Instead, we're just going to essentially have that be an elided parameter that there's a variant later that can take a framer. Michael, do you want to comment?
Yeah, my comment is that I should have read this PR and my comment again to remind myself of what the issue was. Okay, so I thought it's inconsistent the way we have it. What I'm pretty sure of from my memory is that I didn't have a very strong opinion about it. So I'm probably okay with taking it as it is.
Yeah. I think part of this is where it gets into the weirdness of our pseudo programming language here. Some languages do allow essentially saying that if you have a different number of parameters, it is a different function, and that they can both be called add and both be called get, even if they take different numbers of things, and some don't allow that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's the rule for our made up example language here.
I guess we said it has optional parameters with this question mark, and therefore we should somehow allow it and leave it to the language implemented how to cope with that. So either make 2 variants of the function or yeah, give it a null argument. I think this is up to the implementer.
So are you arguing for having the original one have an optional parameter in it?
I think for this one, we really have to make our mind what's better for that. Either have, so we have a scope for the whole property system already, and we have defined the scope to be able to accommodate protocol specific properties and implementation specific properties. And now for the framer, it's the question whether we really add the scope parameter here, or we say, oh yes, it's a special case of the scope we already have up in the definition of properties, and it's an implementation specific properties that's just prefixed with the name of the framer. So you could take it that way, or you could take it the original way with the scope parameter here and explicitly name the framer. So I have no.
I guess
what's better and what's more consistent.
As far as I can see, this was the only place in the document where we had anything called scope that was a parameter. So I don't know if
probably
there
doesn't
was
matter very much anyway.
No, if you go to the definition of the properties, we had something like a scope.
Like, but it wasn't something that we actually put. It was not part of the API specifically.
It was part of the API, and it was explicitly part of the API to make sure that we could accommodate protocol-specific properties. Something in how to name properties relatively at the beginning.
Here?
No, even further. Specifying properties.
Transport property names. This
transport properties, yes, and there we have no. We called it namespace here. Sorry.
Yeah, and so I right, that makes sense to me. Of essentially namespacing the names of properties, but this scope felt. I think when we looked at it last time, it felt too broad, especially when it really just meant if you have a framer, you can say it's a property for your framer.
Yeah. Okay, and I think using the namespace mechanism to identify the framer would perfectly solve the problem and make it look less awkward.
Right. The other option, and we mentioned that in the PR. The other option would be to do that. I think the weird thing there is that a framer doesn't, if it's not part of the TAPS implementation itself, it's something that is being provided by the application. What is its name, and how do you make sure that the namespace doesn't conflict with other framers that are being used? That's why it seemed clearer just to say, or it's almost like we just want like the property that we pass here to just like somehow also include the framer.
So the question is, do we really have to solve the name clash problem here? So if you give your so first it could be that your implement. So let's assume you have a framer that implements a protocol and more or less exposes a protocol specific property that way. So you implement a framer. We had the start TLS example earlier, and I know it's not a good example, but for this case, exposing parts of this TLS stuff with the as a protocol specific property from the framer looks the right for me. And the question is whether you have multiple stack protocols and implement the framers with that. Just exposing the names from the framer with the protocol name feels somehow right for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, I'm thinking of Martin's sort of flexible protocol implementations kind of thing. We might have multiple implementations for one protocol, and then we would run into namespace issues too, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
we have to solve that namespace collision question in our API document.
So concretely, what are you suggesting? Is like that in the framer text we talk about how you can come up with a property name by appending the name of the framer?
Basically making a framer part of the namespace, like we already have it in transfer property names 4.1 would be the suggestion.
Okay, so
I
what
think.
I'm going to do,
And then you would
is
prepend the name of the framer and not append.
yeah. So I'm going to just tag you here to say, can you propose text for how we can prepend the name of the framer as a namespace for the properties we add get. And I think this upper part could actually remain the same. And it's really just in the framer part we say, hey, there's a way to namespace properties for framers.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then you don't
I
have
think
that
that makes sense.
inconsistency of having an extra parameter.
Great.
Or
Okay.
assuming it gives you a different function when you give one, you have one, yeah.
All right. And I will also add Philip as a co-assignee here. Fantastic. All right, we have a way forward there. We don't have text yet, but we will move. Okay, we had this PR from Sean, and I've merged a bunch of Sean's PRs, which is great. This one I was not as sure on. This is just a typo, but let's take a look at the change here. So it used to say at least one local endpoint must be specified for listen. Now it says should, and at least one remote must be specified for initiated outbound connections, and now it says should. I think I just disagree with that. Sean, do you want to help us discuss?
Or maybe I did. I will completely defer to your knowledge here. When I read this, I was just trying to think which way it went. If you read this again and you're like, nope, you're wrong, don't accept the change then.
Okay. Do other people agree that we do indeed need a local endpoint for listening and a remote endpoint for initiating connections?
I mean, I could see a default local endpoint for listening being configured somehow. I cannot see missing a remote endpoint. And I mean, you got to connect somewhere, right?
Right. Okay, so I guess, right, I could also see, I mean, for listening, yeah, because you could say, I don't care about my address and I don't care about my port, and just assign one to me. So I think you could, that could become a should. But I think we definitely need we still need to keep a must for remote. Like, you need to say what you're talking to. So actually, would people be okay with just keeping
I was just
here?
So for the first one, definitely should. For the second one, if you have something strange like OSPF where you know you can only talk to a specific multicast address, you might be able to skip that and just derive this from the other parameters on the local endpoint. But that sounds very...
Ooh.
That sounds like a corner case of a corner case.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, maybe if we change to should, we should also explain the situation where it's not needed.
On the listener side? Oh, actually,
Yeah.
but it says the list of local endpoints. Oh, wait, right.
Oh, well, I just looked at the issue again, And I think it's pretty clear that Sean just had an issue with the wording, that basically the sentence says must, but somehow not always must. And then the other one also for the remote case says must, but then somehow not always must. And you answered by saying if listener must have local, may have remote. If initiator must have remote, may have local. And I think that settles it. And it's just a way of phrasing this in text. So I think we all agree that, well, about this condition, about if listener must have local, may have remote, and vice versa. And based on what Sean just said, I think we should leave the sentence as it is. Because nobody actually proposed a semantic change to the must and should.
Okay, so just close the PR.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I would agree with that. Okay. Updating outdated references. I think this looks good. There was one open comment about, do we want to add a reference for ice? And I think we'd asked if Colin or someone else could chime in about that. So currently it only references 8445 for ICE, and the question is, should we also reference 8839? And what is 8839? I'm not sure if it's necessarily needed. Does anyone have an opinion here? Okay, if not, I'm just going to go ahead and merge this because I think it looks good. Okay. Corey, do you want to talk us through this one? Is Corey on?
I'm here. I have a small screen on my laptop. I can't see what this is.
Sorry. Apologies. Issue PR number 1000.
Right. I'll dig to it.
So I see path is network path.
Right.
I guess this is a implementation document change. Yeah, I think it looks good to me.
If I can spell network, I think it's okay. I think we went through something similar previously.
Yes. Yeah, I think this seems
it's
very
to do with
reasonable.
Okay,
yeah.
well,
It's a lot of fine tweaks to fix the words interface and network and other things when we used them rather loosely in the past. But I don't think it caused any contention.
Okay, there's a typo.
I saw it exactly, just a typo.
Okay, but Michael, other than the typo, you think it's good?
No, just a typo.
Yeah, but you're fine merging it after that.
Yeah, I just saw that and thought,
okay,
better fix it right away.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, and then I opened a bunch of PRs yesterday. Michael, you commented here, right? So this is in the implementation draft, talking about framers. We had an issue just to mention that you must, the implementation must make sure that calls on a framer are synchronized so that operations like adding a framer or passing through data is synchronized with actually sending and parsing data, and that those can't overlap in an inconsistent manner. Michael, it sounded like you had kind of reviewed this. Does anyone object to merging this?
Fine.
Okay. All right. So this one is about, we had a discussion around the immutability of pre-connections. This is also an implementation and essentially trying to clarify what it means that once a connection has been started, the application cannot change the pre-connection. Anna,
Yeah, I don't
can you
know
explain
about
the
this
niche?
last part that was added. I mean, that seemed to kind of say what Brian was complaining about, that it was the same object that changed from,
Okay.
that is expressed both as mutable and immutable. Actually, I'm not sure what the problem was from the beginning, because the text actually talks about two different objects, I think, but I think the new text is clearer, so except for this last part that I didn't understand.
Okay. I will just remove that.
And there was a typo also.
Was the typo only on the new text?
No, it was there from the beginning. It's on the makes. The application makes changes to the. It cannot, or the list cannot be mutated by the application makes changes.
Yes, thank you.
Application making changes.
Cannot be mutated by the application making changes. Yes. Perfect. All right. I think that's good then.
Would there be a way to make that long sentence into something a little shorter? Somehow break it in two? I don't know how, but I just feel it's a very long, hard to read sentence.
I don't see it clearly. That's a good way to do that.
Well, neither can I.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
let's merge this, and we can always come back.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
I look forward to seeing what the RFC editor process on this stuff is going to be like. All right, and this one was approved by Anna. Essentially explaining, I think this is in response to one of Martin's issues, that the way that an application expresses preference, or one of the ways to express a preference for what address to choose when racing different addresses, is via selection properties, and it gives the example of using temporary privacy addresses. And if you prefer that, then you end up preferring v6. If you require it, you require v6, etc., and just kind of explaining how that can influence things. Any objections here? Okay. Since it has an approval, I'm going to go ahead and merge it. All right, and that is our pull request list. So we're just going to wait for Philip to help comment on some text here. Shall we go over to issues? Cool. Alrighty. Let's filter by what's first on architecture. That's just a cleanup one. Let's filter based on API. So we do have 8 here. These are not going to be talked about. And then we have these ones. So what's the PR here?
Can certainly knock one of the ones out about the priority in like 10 seconds. It was just a question.
Oh, which one?
The one that's number 9, that one right there. Yeah, the priority default value. I just
hovering right over.
like a value of 100, and I'm like, why 100?
Yeah.
Why not? Okay, I had to pick something. Great, close it. That was only. There's some great thinking that was behind that. If it's like we had to pick something, we could have
There
picked
is
40.
there is some great thinking, right? You need something in the middle of things.
Right. Okay.
So that smaller and larger values can come later.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. I mean, it's right. Like essentially, like the approaches I've seen are like you can use like a double between 0 and 1, and you just use that for priority, or you just use big integers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any suggestion to change. I was really just kind of curious. So I mean, feel free to go ahead and close it out. I just wanted to know if there was some grand thinking behind it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in there.
No, that's great.
I think let's close.
Fine by me. Thank you all. All right. So this one got some text. It got closed. It got reopened. So is Colin on the call right now? Yeah. I guess, do you think you'll have cycles to try to clarify this bit? Colin, are you with us?
Hello, did someone mention me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We were looking at
Apologies,
this
I wasn't
issue.
really
I think
paying
it's
attention.
currently waiting. I just wanted to check, but your audio is very choppy.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Any
Okay. I think let's just, if you could comment in the issue maybe, and then we'll just move on for now. We're having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
This issue is the PR we were discussing that we're waiting for tech. Oh. Yes, now I can.
Okay, there seems to be about 5 seconds delay.
And no, we can't. Oh. Ooh. And now he's offline. And yeah, there seems to be a delay.
Okay, Is that any better?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I was saying I had missed the question, unfortunately, because I was not paying attention. So if you have the context.
The context is just, we have this issue, there had been discussion, you had reopened it, and I think we're just waiting for text or proposals from you. Is this something that you'll be able to do sometime soon?
It is something I am planning to do. Yes, I haven't had a chance to do it for this meeting, unfortunately. But yeah, it's on my list to do. This is the multicast stuff, right? Looking at the PR.
It's about adding ASM back into the multicast, because we did the source address part, but we haven't added the ASM part.
Yeah, this is the rendezvous thing. Yeah, I mean, if people have no objection to me proposing, we use rendezvous, then yes, I'll put a PR in. I just haven't had a chance to do it yet.
I think my objection will only be, Colin, if it turns out to be many words. I mean, if it's nice and clean and simple, then it might be good.
Okay, I will try to make it nice and clean and simple in that case.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's simpler than the current approach, which is why I'm proposing it. So, but yes, I'll try to do that.
Okay. All right. So this issue on certificate path validation, let's see, let me pull up section 6.3.2.
Trust callbacks, and it just kind of jumped out at me as
yes,
this is something it's about like cert path validation. So is it worth adding a reference? And it's simply that, an informative reference to like, hey, if you're going to do this and using certificates, go read over here.
got it. Certificate path validation. What is
And that's like the Mac Daddy of the PKI specs, right? It's got
yeah,
the cert format, it's got CRLs, it's like how you do trust verification and walking back the
Perfect.
names. Yeah.
Got it. Yes, we should. Yeah, in general, because this is something we do in our APIs of the system itself will do that and do the right thing. It's like, if you want to have some customized validation, then you use this call out to do additional things, but it is around this area. Yeah. I can assign that to myself. I can write up text for that. All right. And then this one.
Looking at the security parameters and the things that are set, and I was like, yeah, most of it's there, because you're setting identities and private keys, and they're flowing back and forth. But what I didn't notice was if you were going to use pre-shared keys, and I don't know if you need to specifically call that out here or if that's already supported. And so that's really was like, should we be pointing there or not?
Good. And so this is, yeah.
And I didn't propose anything because I wasn't really sure. But it was just kind of like it's got a bunch of stuff in there and you're including things, and yeah, it all kind of looks good, but like, is there, we know PSK is used. Should we have it included in here?
This is Reese as an individual. I think we already have pre-shared keying material import in
Yeah.
631. I'm wondering if there is something missing from that paragraph.
Let me assign myself, and then also let me tag Chris on here because he was involved in some of the early stuff. Again, like in our experience, I think
that I missed it.
What we expose is just a generic pre-shared key, and then it gets interpreted kind of by the TLS layer. But
so it may turn out that you're like, no, that's fine, close it. Yeah, I'm not. There's no like axe I'm grinding, just to make sure that got covered.
That's great. Yeah, so I'll make sure we review this with Chris. That's good. Okay. And then this is a relatively new one. Property inheritance. Michael, you were engaging on this. Do you want to talk through it?
Yeah, I would like to hear Philip's opinion, because so I self-assigned because I thought I had a way out, and if people would agree that this is the way out, I can do it, and that's that. But it seems that Philip doesn't agree, and I don't fully get what he wrote here.
Okay, so can you just explain it to us a bit?
Me, the issue, or Philip, his answer?
Please,
Or
first
you the issue, and then Philip the answer?
Okay, yeah. So the issue is that you can create a message context and adjust stuff in it at any point, and it doesn't have anything to do with connection or selection properties. And then you're expecting that when you then later use it, it should inherit. Like if you don't do anything about it, actually, if you just create it but you don't change it, then it should maybe get a value from a connection property inherited from that, right? So for instance, reliability. If you don't like you create a message context, but the context would have an object for deciding about message reliability, and the default would be reliable when you use it for a connection. But the issue is that the object itself is not connected to a connection somehow. So I can create it at any time long before I even make a pre-connection, right? And it should somehow be made clear that it inherits the property of the connection that it's used on when a message is sent, or using this message context. So that's the issue. That's the behavior that we want. The question is how to put this in words.
So can I ask a question? How does that work if you then have changed one of the values beforehand? How you need to keep track of that then? So that you don't have the default if you connect it to the connection later? Or do you maybe need to not create it before you have a connection to send it on?
That's explicitly the thing I guess we wanted to work around with the original implementation, saying we see this message context as something like a dictionary, and you put all the changes you want to have on a send in this dictionary. Then you give it to the send, and the send will then apply all the defaults and apply then the changes from the message context over the defaults. This is how I think when writing this, we anticipated it. And Bentor saw that no, a message context should have all the states of all the properties in the way the send will do it. And if you want it that way, you would really need to create the message context from the connection, and then make sure that you can use it for an introspection and other stuff to make sure what would happen to that send. So this would be the alternative implementation, but we really...
Yeah.
And now
Philip, I agree with your original interpretation. That's also how I interpret it.
Yeah,
okay.
I think the issue is that Bent has misinterpreted it, and that means that the text isn't so clear about it. I think that is really the issue, that we have to make this clearer.
Okay, so we should make the inheritance of properties from connection-wide preferences onto messages more clear. Okay, and
yeah,
Michael,
so
this is assigned to you. Do you want to tackle this?
So now the next part of this is that my proposal on how to do this here was to say that we can just say that they all have a default, and the default is ignore. And ignore means that it's going to be overwritten by the connection behavior when you use it for the connection. So unless you set it to something specifically, it's going to have that behavior. Then we have this message from Phil saying ignore is going to be really bad here.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation I'd like to have.
Yeah.
What is it you meant?
I would be fine with the mechanism you propose, but just don't call it ignore. Just call it inherit or default.
Okay.
Does
that
it
is
need...
what I wasn't sure about. So it's just the wording that you didn't like.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then I'm fine with that.
Can
I guess... Oh, yes. Reese?
Can I just related to our type question here? So I think there was also some discussion about this being a Boolean, but then people, I guess, want to turn it into a preference, and I'm not entirely sure what's the best way here, but maybe there should have been a preference all along when it's sort of something to be set on a message. But we do also have this thing of basically turning a selection property into a Boolean after protocol selection has happened, right? You have a specific selection property, a specific feature, and either your protocol stack supports it or not, right? At that point, it's not really about prefer versus avoid anymore. The protocol either has it or not.
Yeah, but
I'm not sure how this works.
But that's a different thing, right? I mean, that is kind of natural. I mean, you choose something, you say I would like it or not, and if you get it, then it becomes a Boolean situation, right? But the proposal here for using a selection property is kind of just to misuse that type, because that type exists, and say we basically redefine the values to mean true and false, which I think is pretty ugly, because that means semantically this isn't the preference. It is a Boolean.
So I would be fine with, for example, for reliability on a message context, saying, okay, we call it we use a property preference there too, and just say, okay, when sending a message, you have the preference of not using reliability on that message. If you got chosen TCP, then it's reliable anyway. If you really want no reliability and say reliability prohibit, and you've chosen TCP, you get a send error back. So for this case and for some other cases, I could really
it becomes awkward, doesn't it? Because you then have message context. Like in principle, somebody can create so many message contexts and put a few preferences in there, and then also create connections and say I have this and this preference for this connection, and now I want to use this message context with these preferences on. I mean, it becomes just a strange mix of things.
I think that's okay, Michael. Like, I mean, if we look at the text we have here, we essentially say, yeah, if you set message properties that are so inconsistent that they're not even possible with your underlying connection, you get an error. If it's possible, then it overrides it. I think maybe to some degree the only thing we're missing, and rather than trying to have some default value in a message context already being filled out, can't we just add a paragraph that says, if the application does not add a specific message property to a message, that all properties from the connection are inherited, and just say like there is no default value, there is no inherit value. You just didn't add it. If you didn't add it, then it's not there.
But that's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm
That's
not-
the same as saying that the default value and it means it's going to be overwritten. It's just shorter and nicer.
Right.
So that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with what Tommy is proposing, but I'm not sure if every message property has a corresponding connection property.
No, there are actually I think only 2 cases that we're talking about.
Okay.
2 or 3 maybe. that are
Lifetime
overwritten
priority
like
ordered.
this. Yeah,
Hmm.
so it's only a handful.
Yeah, there's like 10. But okay, so let's see. So the suggestion in what is this section? In 9.1.3. Explain that if you don't set a specific property on the message, the connection and selection properties apply by default, or just apply based on what the connection has. And then should we also say that every message property just has its default value? And every message property, the 10 listed in the section.
But look, I mean, this
If
really
the
is
connection
about.
doesn't specify them.
I think it is only about 2. Why did you say it's about 10?
Or isn't
I mean,
it?
there are
Wait,
only
which
these-
2 are we talking about?
So if you look at the message properties, there's only 2 or 3 that as a default have a description saying the queried value of the selection property, for instance, reliability, or inherited from the connection property something. Others don't. Others are just false or true or whatever.
Oh,
Or
So
infinite lifetime. That's what I was
the
saying
case for
also.
everything. It's just 2 or 3 properties.
I see. Yes, it's just these. Yeah, these 2 inherit. Okay, fine.
Yeah, priority, ordered. Yeah, that's just 3. Reliable data transfer message. On no
Right.
4 also message.
But maybe we should just
No,
specify
these
it
three,
on
I
each
think.
of those properties then.
Yeah, that's what I thought. We can just write this per. I mean, this is what I wanted to propose to just give it a value as a default that says it's going to be overwritten. But we can use the phrasing that Tommy just said and just put it per property.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes. And Michael, I think it sounds like you have a great idea here. So
Yeah.
just, feel free to make a PR. I think adding something to all of the properties or whatever makes sense. It may be nice to just have some text up above, because that's the area that the person who filed the issue got confused in.
Yeah.
And so just explicitly saying, by the way, when you look below, it explains how they inherit and what their defaults are. If you don't set
Right.
it.
Yes.
Okay. I think we have a way forward here.
Yes.
So that means, on API, we effectively have 1, 2, 3, 4 proper issues that still need text, and they all have assignees. That's good. All right. Did we want to move over to implementation, or I guess?
Let's take a look at what we
Reese,
have
what's
for
your?
implementation.
Are we doing okay
Yeah,
on time?
I think we're doing okay on time. We have another hour. I would like us to take a couple minutes towards the end to talk about IETF 113. But I think it's good to take a look at what implementation issues we have first.
Okay. All right. What's a path? I think. Yeah, this is. Oh, this is the one that Gory just did. Okay. I think we can close this. That just didn't mark it. Woo. I just need to do this. That's on me. What? Sorry. GitHub is being weird on me. Okay. I'm just going to close these out. Interface for app-driven racing unconnected protocols. Yeah, I still just need to do that. I was trying to clear out some of the implementation issues, but this one got merged. So I'm going to close this. This, I think, is similar to the other issue we were talking about for getting into more details of certificate validation. Does anyone remember that? Here we go, 977. Okay, I think this is more of a to-do. Final pass. Again, the implementation mapping. Anna, I guess you'll be able to get to that sometime.
Yeah, that one relies on the previous one.
Yes. Privacy
But now when the API is
considerations.
stable, we should, yeah, I will try and get to them.
Great, great.
So
Okay,
I said I was going to do this part of my edit pass, which happened in March of 2021. I need to go have a look at what I did there and see if I just forgot to do this or whether I forgot to close the bug. So
got it.
I'll have that right now.
Yeah, at the very least, let me just look at our current security.
Yeah. Did I
well, it's not
rename it?
renamed.
It got renamed. Did it get renamed?
Not the one in implementation.
Not the one in implementation. Okay, so I think I might have just forgotten to do this, so I'll go do it.
Great.
And I suspect it's the same for the next one.
Yeah, this is just a review pass. Yep. So yeah, we can just double check. Maybe some of it was.
Yep,
maybe
I'll
not.
double check those.
Great. This one is with me. I was looking at this. I'll get to this soon. This is, I can just do a big kind of editorial pass to get that. And then this is essentially just a to-do of when we're shipping the API to make sure we do a pass on implementation. So I think that's it for issues. I think we're in a pretty good spot, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm kind of wondering, given that we already had working group last call on architecture and API and on implementation, I'm seeing a couple of editorial issues. I'm wondering if we should consider a working group last call on implementation soon to get more comments.
The standard working group last call is a threat, right?
I'm thinking of using it as a motivation to get
Yeah.
people to read it. To have
We're gonna publish it. So
yeah. Yeah, but seriously, I think we're getting closer and closer to finishing those documents, which is great.
So API, as I understand it, we've got like a couple of outstanding things there, and we'll do another rev before Vienna. Is that what we're targeting to do?
That'd
Or
be great. That'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And for implementation, we have a couple of outstanding issues that we just looked at, but maybe should we try doing a working group last call on implementation very soon? Yeah. Do people think that is something we can do before Vienna?
Try.
Like when is so? Just from a logistics standpoint, right? Like so now it's the 2nd of February. We are not going to schedule another interim before the IETF, I presume. I know this is driving you forward to your next.
Probably not.
So, like, would we say working group last call on implementation starting at the IETF? Does that seem reasonable?
Starting after the IETF?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you can, if we are all planning on going to Vienna, which I'm not sure we are all planning on going to Vienna, but let's alternate universe this and say everyone's going to Vienna. I would propose that the chairs say at the beginning, or whenever we do the updates, like, and working group last call begins now, right? Because I don't think it's feasible to target ending the working group last call before Vienna. I just don't see all of these PRs getting in by then. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Thanks. Anybody else have thoughts on this? Because otherwise, let's talk about IETF 113. We already had a little informal question of who is actually planning to travel, and I think we had not a lot of people, but of the people who joined, anybody already making plans to travel? Just curious.
Yes,
I mean,
to go.
go ahead.
Cool.
Gory, say again.
I said I'm planning to go. Let's see if it works. Should be good.
I have not yet decided whether I am planning to go or not. I strongly suspect that I'm gonna do something that probably a lot of other people are doing, is check the agenda, or check the agendas and the attendee list about 2 weeks before, and then rush book it 2 weeks before, right? Because worst case, I can bicycle home from Vienna. It'd take a while. It'd be fun. But worst case, I can do that. So, I also am not sure what the travel restriction situation will look like at Google at that point in time. If I have to get Warren Kamari to sign off on my expenses, then that's a maybe. If I have to get Ben Trainer to sign off on my expenses, that's a no. But I'm looking into it and I'm considering showing up.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess the orthogonal question to that, because we are going to have a hybrid meeting and remote attendance should be sort of more well supported than at previous in-person meetings. We can always have a TAPS session, and I was wondering if IETF 113 will be a good time for us to have a TAPS session again to sort of maybe start the working group. Last call, we do have a new implementation that we might get a presentation and maybe some discussion on. And then we do have a bunch of potential follow-up work that maybe we would like to start discussing in sort of more concrete terms. But okay, Tommy agrees we should have a session. What do other people think? I'm seeing a thumbs up and some nodding.
I think like in the previous agenda item, I implicitly assumed that we were going to have a session at the meeting. So yes.
Okay, sounds good. And I think we're having 60 minutes and 120 minutes slots again. I think we did well with the 60 minutes slot last summer. So we should probably go with that again. People. Yeah. Do we already have ideas on agenda items other than maybe talking about the Go implementation, which would be one that has already been proposed?
Starting the last call on implementation, which will probably have a bit of an issue scrub on implementation.
Also talking about more protocol-specific properties or protocol mapping documents would make sense.
For sure.
And I have hopes that if we make it on a meeting, we have a chance to drag a few people in to help us with Quick and probably the other pet protocols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our December interim, I think we already mentioned that a quick mapping document would be a great next step. I am not sure if we have anything specific. We have an old draft. Tommy, did you?
Yeah, I had the old draft. I mean, if we put it on the agenda, that'll be a good forcing function to rev that. Or then, like, I won't be able to do that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but after that, sure, why not? So I think, yeah, trying to get a quick mapping document there would be useful. The other thing I can think of, if you're looking for agenda things, you know, as we are kicking off a last call for implementation there, and essentially, you know, saying that, okay, architecture, API are, you know, pretty locked up. It may be worth, and I don't know who would have time to do this, but just kind of having like a summary, like, you know, how do we explain this to the world in a quick pitch? Like, you know, now that we think things have settled down, just a recap of here's where it ended up, and there's this long document, but how do we summarize it, and, you know, something to point people to, just like a deck for like, hey, if you're reading this, and if you know, at some point, if you're the IESG or IETF last call looking at these documents, you know, what's this all about again? And so start talking about, you know, how do we progress this forward and get it more out into the world.
Okay, so this would be specifically about implementation or about tabs in general?
Thinking in kind of in general,
Mm-hmm.
just saying like, hey, we did last call architecture and API. How did it end up? Just reminding people, especially if we expect to have people in the room who are not on these calls.
Well, I think Brian's TSV art talk has not been overcome by any of the changes to the document we've made since.
That's true. That's true.
So that's like a good, well, I mean, it's like 20-minute talk plus 40 minutes of arguing, but like that's a relatively large time commitment. But if people really want to know what it's all about, like that's about as good as entry point as you'll get. So I mean, that's easy to find in the YouTube archives.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the specific agenda item would be for this case for a TAPS meeting.
Maybe all we need to
Interesting
do is
that,
add that.
So one
So-
thing, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
No.
We're talking. No, Gauri, go ahead.
Yeah, I was only suggesting the way to cover that is simply to put a note to Brian's talk in the agenda and just say, have a look here at the material. And then we don't have to spend time talking about it.
Yeah,
So
I think Chair's slide could actually point to the YouTube link. But I was thinking, like, if you really do a quick mapping, that would actually, that presentation could give an acid test to all the documents, so to say. That's the things that you want to touch, Tommy. So could be.
So the other tool that I've advised to really any any like relatively obscure working group is Wikipedia. With Alto, which is equally obscure. So I was in the habit of like reading about Alto because I was a responsible AD, kind of to like process a document or something and kind of forgetting about it, and like then having to read it again and like make new notes and throw them away and this endless cycle. So I ended up just writing a Wikipedia page about kind of the high level what the heck is this about thing, because I just can't keep that state. And it turned out to be a useful thing to send to the ISG. Like you can skim this, 1,000 words about what the heck this is about in a readable way. And if you're looking for an entry point that is less than an hour of time investment, that would be a good thing to do. Just really accessible text about what the heck this is about, and like some example code or something that's short. You can go to the Alto page if you're curious how I did it for that. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that as something for newbies.
Disambiguate yourself from the movie Taps.
And the song, and
yeah.
Well, believe me, Alto had serious problems. So
yeah,
this is a similar problem. So catchy acronyms, man, it really gets you.
It seems like there's an action item to turn my talk into a Wikipedia page. Has anybody here, like other than Martin, already edited Wikipedia? Martin, should we collaborate on putting some, like I just have no idea, like Wikipedia terrifies me.
Okay, I mean I can do that. Like I mean it's really not hard, but
it's basically Markdown now, right? Or is it still like old school editing things with clicky? Literally, I've lost the ability to use a mouse while I'm typing. It's just kind of
it's Markdownish.
Okay.
Like it's kind of a similar concept. I think it's a different syntax.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, maybe it's Markdown. I don't know. Like it's been a while, but sure, I can help you. We can
yeah.
We can G-chat about it now. So
most of the text.
So,
it's just like we're getting ready to go into perf season, which means if I don't have somebody who's like gonna bother me about it, then it's not gonna happen before.
Yeah. I'll nag you. I mean, if it doesn't have to be you, Brian, but like it's certainly easy enough because we can do.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, if I can set up the format and like if you just have some text you want me to cut and paste into it, that's fine.
Let's cycle around it. Let's do
all right. Yeah, I'll send you like an outline and you can fill in the outline with stuff, and I can magic that into.
So can I say something before you go like finalizing the Wikipedia thing? Because I mean, let me just understand the thing. The Wikipedia, anybody can edit, right? So yes. Are we saying like a TAPS working group taking this Wikipedia page as a information center kind of thing and take the ownership of that one? And what if somebody just screw around that Wikipedia and does something wrong? So who is gonna like take care of those things? I really like the idea of wiki, but I'm not sure like Wikipedia is the right media here.
Theoretically, you shouldn't be doing a first-party article on Wikipedia. Like, you can't write an article about yourself and put it on Wikipedia. It'll get deleted.
Exactly.
So,
well, I mean, their references though. I mean, so that the way that manifests itself is that like you need references. So if I write an article about myself and there's no media about me, then that doesn't get anywhere. But like you can point to internet drafts and RFCs, and that's the documentation that they need.
Right. And
like I said,
literally, I would expect that a lot of the stuff is going to be quotes directly from like the Arch document, right?
Yeah, but what about a working group wiki? I mean, that a possibility we have.
So I think the idea, and what Alto did with this, right? The idea is to make sure that people who are not necessarily like paying attention to the working group can fall into having information about what's going on, right? Like, so the advantage of if we put something on a working group wiki and then we put something on Wikipedia, I'm pretty sure where the natural SEO is going to rank those in the search rankings in, you know, your favorite search engine.
So like, so a couple things. So I mean, so to solve the small purpose of IETFers being able to find an accessible summary of what the heck this is, it is true that like Track or whatever the new tool, and like the one issue is they're like migrating from Track to something else, and I don't know what something else is yet. But like both are equally fine. I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world to have publicly accessible information on something like Wikipedia. I mean, we don't have to like quote unquote maintain it. We can report abuse and vandalism if it exists. And I mean, I'm not an expert on Wikipedia procedures, although I know who people who are. But like, there's a way to handle that. I mean, we don't have to like explicitly maintain it, and it certainly hasn't been a problem with Alto. We don't really have ownership of it per se. So like I theoretically we could become the targets of this sort of abuse, which would require some effort to resist, but like I'm not sure that's a practical concern. But if people really want to do this in Track and not deal with it, like I don't think that's a showstopper. Not Track, but whatever the new thing is.
Right. So we would should make sure that everyone agrees that putting it on Wikipedia means more or less leaving it out there for anyone to, add things to it, and make sure that we don't call that we own the text. And it's so in a year it can happen that it's not Brian text anymore, and if it's right, we should be fine with that.
Yeah, that's actually what we want.
So
to have.
there is an idea of like having an IETF blog. I think that could also serve the purpose. That's like I think that will also enrich our IETF blog content.
I think we've already done an IETF blog post on this. If I don't, I've done one or two, and I think one of them was on TAPS. But we can check the blog, and if there's not one on TAPS, then we can do one on TAPS, right? I think none of this changes sort of the action item that Martin and I are taking, in that like the content's going to be the same no matter how we we disseminate it. And like, you know, the next question is why not both, right? I mean, once you have the thing, you can just sort of like put it on the channels that you want to put it on in order to get it in front of the people that you want to get it in front of. Maybe I wrote
I would say that
blog post on TAPS, but it was like, well, it's 2 years ago, but again, things haven't changed, so.
I would say the IETF blog and Wikipedia might also be tend to be different audiences.
But I think
there is an APNIC blog article as well.
Yeah, that was the one
I think both are useful, but so it's not contemporary information that we think goes away like many blog entries. So I think it's both fine to have both.
So I will take the action item to email you an outline, Brian, and then you can fill in text as appropriate and links and stuff, and I can pretty it up for Wikipedia. And if people want to go put that in other outlets, like, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and like the AppNic blog post was beginning of 2021, right? Like, so it's newer than some of the bugs that we're talking about today. So like it's accurate to, you know, the level of accuracy that we're talking about here, right? I don't actually remember it, but the TSP talk I gave, that was in person, right? That was, you know, that was in the antediluvian past. So
Right, that would have been TSV area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually, a pretty
so
good
I
article.
mean, I don't want to discuss, Martin. You outline this one. I think we can figure it out where to publish this one. This would be anyway a good post wherever we do it. My personal thinking is, like, as long as we don't claim the ownership of Wikipedia, we should be fine. And whatever blog post we do, we can anyway, somebody else in this world can take an TAPS Wikipedia page and like refer to all the RFCs and blog posts that we are doing. So that should not be a big deal. But as a main communication method, I don't want to take the TAPS working group to take the ownership of Wikipedia content in any sense. So that would be my only concern. But I really like what you guys are doing here, discussing. So please continue with that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Did we have more suggestions for either the topic at hand of explaining tabs or the tab session at IETF-113? And yeah, I am also unsure if we are going to have time for another tabs interim before IETF-113. It seems kind of tight.
You know, I think the next meeting is in Vienna or in Vienna.
Or in virtual Vienna, yeah.
I guess
right.
I guess we could have a sort of deadline for trying to get all the PRs in and see if we can agree on them. We don't need a real meeting. If they're pretty close, then maybe we could just sign them off and then we have a more clean position. So maybe just an email round reminding us when that comes up would be enough rather than having an interim.
A week before, or a couple of days before the draft deadline before the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, draft deadline. Let's see, when is that? Internet draft submission cutoff is on March 7th, Monday.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, like March 2nd.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's try to get in a new revision of interface, but also maybe implementation if we can get a couple more issues resolved by then. And especially if we're going to working group last call implementation, we should publish a version that we actually want to last call. So yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay. Yeah, I think unless somebody else had something that we wanted to discuss in this round, maybe we can give everybody half an hour back. All right, not hearing any pushback. Thank you all for participating in this TAPS interim, and I am looking forward to seeing you in Vienna and or in virtual Vienna.
Thanks, bye.
All right, Max.
Bye.
Take care.
Have a nice evening. Or whatever.